for the interest of time. Welcome tonight. Just like to get a quick show of hands, I'm curious how many of you were able to make the January 9th meeting when Urban Land Institute was first here. So that's good. I just want to make sure that a lot of folks, repeat folks that were able to provide input at that meeting, and maybe some new faces tonight that are here for this evening. My name is Todd Oklachaney, and I'm the Planning and Urban Design Director for the City of Asheville. And before we get started, I wanted to introduce Untitled Language Justice Cooperative. And do you folks want to say anything, or if you don't mind, there or coming up here?
Good evening. We are Sensontle, a language justice co-op based right here in Asheville.
Buenas tardes, somos Sensontle, una cooperativa de justicia y lenguaje que está basada aquí en Asheville.
This evening we'll be providing interpretation from English into Spanish and from Spanish into English.
Esta noche estaremos interpretando de inglés a español y español a inglés. Si alguien en la sala necesita equipo de interpretación para escuchar la presentación en español, por favor vengan a la mesa para agarrar su equipo.
Thank you very much for helping us create bilingual spaces.
Y muchas gracias por ayudarnos a crear un espacio bilingüe.
Great, thank you very much for being here. I also want to acknowledge elected officials in the room. I mentioned, or I saw here, Councilmember Vijay Kapoor. If you don't mind standing up. I'm not sure if there are any other elected officials that I may have missed. Also, City Manager Deborah Campbell is in the audience. Assistant City Manager Kathy Ball is also here.
She's out in the lobby.
Out in the lobby there. So the agenda tonight. Oh, okay. Richard White, also our other Assistant City Manager. Thank you. Tonight is basically a wrap-up of kind of what we heard at the last meeting and the process to date. I'm going to be giving hopefully a short presentation on the hotel moratorium process, what to expect for next steps in the next few months, and try to provide a brief overview of staff's briefing report that we prepared a couple of weeks before the January 9th meeting when Urban Land Institute was here, that outlines impacts of hotel development in the city and county. Urban Land Institute, who is an independent research organization, has come back, and they have volunteer panelists over here on my right, your left, that were here on January 9th, and we've been working together as well over the last 2 months or so. At the end of the presentation, there will be a Q&A. Everyone should have gotten an index card. If you haven't, they're up in the front in the lobby. What we're going to ask folks is fill out your question, and that's what's going to be given to city staff to provide to Urban Land Institute to try to respond to all your questions that we can get to within the time frame that we have. During the presentation, if folks don't mind, if you're in the middle, handing the index cards down your row to folks that are sitting at the edges of the rows, and then city staff will come by and collect those index cards from you. And we'll try to leave a little bit of time after the Urban Land Institute presentation as well to try to collect those cards if you haven't had an opportunity to write your question down for them. So to get started, as a reminder, what was the impetus for the city's hotel moratorium? In the last few years, we have had quite an influx of new hotel development in the city. About 1,300 rooms have been opened in the city out of almost 2,800 or so rooms that have been approved either by city council or by city staff through our development review process. A large number of those hotels have been clustered within the central business district and around the CBD, as well as some other clusters throughout the city. And community members, city council members, staff members have all expressed concerns over the years about what are the impacts of hotel development, trying to have a better understanding objectively with data about what those impacts are, both good and bad, and that the city currently lacks concrete policies, strategies, and tools to effectively manage and review those types of uses within the city. That's often led to contentious meetings, either in council or in other community meetings. Therefore, the Asheville City Council adopted a temporary 1-year moratorium on new hotel applications in September of 2019. For an overview of the entire moratorium process, as I mentioned, September 24th, City Council adopted the 1-year moratorium, which will last till September 24th, 2020. City staff contracted with the Urban Land Institute back in fall. Many of you were here on January 9th at the Collider, which was a community listening session, to hear from you all what your concerns are and your observations regarding hotel development. ULI is obviously back here tonight. They're here to present recommendations and a menu of tools that we might consider as we move forward over the next couple of months. Next month, in late February, there will be a City Council work session where staff will kind of give an overview of the presentations that are shared with you all tonight and share with our council members the recommendations and get feedback from our council members of what we should prioritize in terms of the recommendations in the tools and what we should focus on in a limited number of months that we have before the moratorium ends. And there might be some longer term strategies as well that could possibly extend beyond that time frame as well. So we'll try to identify some of those over the next couple of months and what that time frame might look like. In March, Urban Land Institute will provide a final written report and hand that to the city. And then basically through the spring, there will be other opportunities for community engagement. That doesn't end tonight. We hope to hold at least one more public work session like this. City staff will be presenting to respective city boards and commissions and getting input from those bodies as well. And we're going to conduct an overall community engagement plan over the next couple of months. So our work doesn't stop tonight. And again, as I mentioned, before September, hopefully sometime during the summer, city staff will be presenting the final recommendations to City Council, which may possibly include some zoning recommendations to consider before September of this year. In terms of just getting into a little bit more detail about this process with Urban Land Institute, and they'll talk about this as well, but they are an independent organization. The volunteers that they have are experts in their respective areas, and they look at data and they provide objective feedback, very independent from anything the city might provide. They listen to input from the community, and they also read and considered the city staff's briefing report, which is on our website. I'm going to give an overview of that report tonight and summarize what that report says. In the second phase, as I mentioned, city staff will then take those recommendations, utilize the Urban Land Institute report that they'll produce in March, as well as the community input and comments that you have all provided, and we'll further develop those strategies and recommendations for consideration. Some of the questions that we asked Urban Land Institute to answer as part of this process: what is the appropriate balance of hotels? How can we Asheville leverage hotel development to meet various city goals? Should the city consider special requirements for hotel development? And how can the city work with hoteliers and other partners to possibly reduce any negative impacts or unintended consequences of hotel development? To get into some of the current trends that we've been experiencing recently and even going a little bit further back in history, as many of you know, Asheville for a long time, for over 100 years, has been a tourism town since the early 20th century. What this chart on the right shows, the blue line represents the growth trend of our population since the early 20th century, and the red line overlapped on that is the trend line for the number of hotels in the city. So the first dot you can see is about 16 hotels in the mid-1920s, and we're currently at about 82 or so hotels that are currently open in the city. And then what we looked at, just looking at some trends in ratios of population to the number of hotels, city staff tried to give our best estimate of maybe how many more hotels we could expect in the next couple of years. That number, we have about 14 additional hotels by 2030. It's not a magic number by any means. It's just trying to get a sense based on the trends that we've been experiencing, how many hotels we could expect, but certainly without doing any kind of additional market analysis, it would be hard to really pinpoint what that number could be. But I just wanted to show you again that how the trend line for hotel development in the city has kept pace somewhat with our population over the years. In terms of measuring the success of hotels and performance of hotels in the city, we looked at a number of measures. The one measure we're sharing here is the average occupancy rate. The blue line, there's actually several blue lines. Those represent the occupancy rate in Asheville between 2015 and 2019. The light blue line is the year 2015, and then there's a spectrum of colors. It goes to 2019 is the darkest blue line on this graph. The red lines represent the U.S. average. And again, the darker the line, that almost maroon color, is 2019, and the lighter red is 2015. Basically, what we're just trying to show are these trends in occupancy rates over the years. What you can see is Asheville generally is higher than U.S. average for hotel occupancy rates in the city, except for the winter months in January and February. There's a dip. Throughout the rest of the year, particularly in the fall and summer months, the occupancy rates of hotels in the city spikes at its highest to over 80%. And speaking with a lot of people in the industry, having an occupancy rate of over 80% is a very good number to have for occupancy rate of hotels. In terms of visitation, not all this information is probably new to you, but we have 11 million visitors annually in 2017, which is a slight increase over the prior year. But it's important to note when we talk about visitors in a lot of the data that you see, that many of those aren't necessarily overnight guests, that about 65% of visitors are actually people who are traveling, who might live in the region or traveling within a certain proximity to the city to access various amenities, healthcare, entertainment, and those sorts of things. In terms of employment, despite growth in professional sectors in that type of industry, 15% of employment in Buncombe County is attributed to what we call direct, indirect, and induced impacts of tourism. There's definitions for all these things of what they mean, but basically you have your kind of direct spending and the impacts, and then there's indirect jobs that are created that are related to the hotel industry, but it might be in other sectors such as recreation, for example. And induced impacts are when you have folks in the tourism industry, lodging industry, making wages and spending those dollars and contributing to the economy within the area. Finally, tourism-related jobs rank third in the county after healthcare and retail industries. So there are two other job sectors that where we have a higher concentration of jobs. But nonetheless, tourism-related jobs are obviously a big segment of our employment in the city and region. Regarding income and wages, this was another question that we were asked to look at, and we were interested in really understanding the numbers. What this chart shows are wages based on different types of job sectors within the Buncombe County region. The accommodation and food service industry jobs are consolidated in this graph, and they're shown with the red bar on top. When you look at those combined, the accommodations and food services job sectors, although they are the lowest paying sector in Buncombe County, they're still higher than the state average by about 16%. And when we look further at the numbers, when you separate food services from hospitality and only look at accommodations and wages for the accommodation job sector, they are about 30% higher. So the food service industry and wages does bring the wages down a little bit when you look at food services and accommodation job industries combined. So we just wanted to kind of note some of that data that we found. It's also important to note when we talk about wages, what the overall wages are within the city. At about $43,000, they are lower compared to the state as a whole and national averages. And a lot of that is due to lower wages in our higher paying job sectors. So when we look at data for wages in our professional, scientific, and tech industries, for example, those wages are significantly lower than the average wage in the state and in the nation. And that tends to bring our overall average wages down within the city. When we look at housing, as many of you know, housing, affordable housing especially, we have a dearth of it in the city. It's a big issue. And as home prices continue to go up, and with lower wages, it does make it difficult for many people to live here. Looking at information from our Bowen housing report that we have updated every couple of years, about 21% of owners in Asheville are cost burdened, which is when you spend more than 30% of your gross income on housing costs. And that's compared to about 8% of owners who we are considered to be severely cost burdened. About 46% of renters are cost burdened, so you have almost 50% of renters, and about 19% are severely cost burdened. And we have a housing gap that many of you know, in terms of the number of units that we're trying to address in terms of the supply of housing overall in the city. We also looked at short-term vacation rental and homestay data in the city. Our data is getting better, although it has been hard over the years as definitions have changed and rules have changed for how we try to track those types of uses in the city. But looking at some data, Asheville has obviously experienced a very high growth in short-term vacation rentals in the last few years, and we found that almost 200% increase in just Airbnb room nights over a 2 fiscal year period. Our current estimates, and again these are rough estimates based on listings online, shows that we have about 1,600 short-term vacation rental units. And again, depending upon the data you look at, it can vary somewhat. We generally have thousands of multiple listings, meaning that one listing might be duplicated on multiple platforms, such as VRBO and Airbnb, for example. And when you look at the proportion of short-term vacation rentals to the number of hotel rooms that are in operation, basically for about every 4 hotel rooms, there's 1 short-term vacation rental unit. Looking at economic impacts of hotels, obviously hotels have a large positive economic impact on the city. I'm not going to repeat all the numbers and kind of billions of dollars of those direct, indirect, and induced impacts that many of you have seen and read about in the paper. But we wanted to really highlight that when we look at data, that visitors have a tremendous impact on small businesses in the city. Also, Buncombe County ranks in the top 4 jurisdictions in the state for the collections of our hotel occupancy tax, which is about $25 million in fiscal year 2019. And that represented about a 137% increase from the 2015 fiscal year. So that number has increased quite a bit over the last couple of years. In terms of water and sewer impacts, we want to look at our infrastructure, because that was an issue that many residents highlight as an important issue. We want to get a better understanding of impacts of hotels on our city infrastructure. When we look at water, hotels use less water typically than similarly sized residential uses. When you compare it to other commercial uses, it depends on the size of those uses, but oftentimes hotel water use can be less than those commercial uses as well. When we look at our wastewater system demand for hotels, it is somewhat comparable to residential uses, but again, it kind of depends on the size. We also looked at our overall capacity of water and sewer within the city, and we look at our wastewater treatment plant and our water system, we're at about 50% capacity for both of those. Looking at hotel impacts on traffic and parking, constantly we always talk about parking in our downtown specifically and some other key nodes within the city. When we look at traffic, hotels typically generate less weekday vehicle trips than many other uses, such as residential, shopping centers, and restaurants. Again, it kind of depends on the mix of uses in these buildings, but generally speaking, hotels do generate less vehicle trips. So what happens is impacts that we see from a specific hotel development is often localized for that specific use. We do require a traffic impact study for larger developments in the city when they create 100 or more vehicle trips within the peak hour. And oftentimes there are mitigation strategies for that particular use for that particular development. And that's generally how we look at traffic, but I think Urban Land Institute probably has a few recommendations pertaining to that topic area. For parking requirements, when we look at our Unified Development Ordinance or our zoning regulations, parking requirements are typically less than many other uses within our zoning. Nonetheless, parking, especially in our downtown, continues to be a number one priority identified by our business community and others within the city. We also wanted to look at impacts of hotels as it relates to community safety and the number of calls that our fire department and our police department receive. To give you a sample size, the number of calls to our fire department are slightly less than restaurant uses and equate to about 1 call per hotel per month. So we look at over a whole entire year's time, it is somewhat of a minimal impact of about 1 call per hotel per month to our fire department. The annual cost is about $2,500 for hotel-related calls to our fire department, and the annual cost for our police department is higher at $658,000, which represents about 2% of the overall police department budget. These hotel-related calls for APD represent about 2% as well of all the department's calls throughout the year. Finally, the last impacts we looked at were environmental, climate change-related impacts, and social impacts. We know that, again, when we look at kind of traffic and CO2 emissions, all uses generate a lot of traffic in the city. A lot of people still drive. Tourism and it is no different. Over 80% of folks travel by car when they're visiting the city. We do get a lot of visitors from the southeast region, but a lot of folks fly as well. And certainly you've read the newspaper about a lot of the increasing numbers in passengers at the airport, especially over the last few years. We looked at kind of some reports prepared by United Nations and other climate-related science experts at just generally speaking the impact of tourism on greenhouse gas emissions. From some of those reports suggest that approximately 8% of greenhouse gas emissions are related to tourism can be contributed to those climate change impacts. Tourism industry biggest emissions contributors worldwide are transportation, shopping, and food. So those are some of the things we looked at for climate change and environmental impacts related to tourism in general. I also want to note when it comes to the social impacts, certainly racial equity, looking at displacement and gentrification are some other big issues that we're looking at right now and trying to deal with as a city. Displacement, certainly, and gentrification have been identified as community concerns. And what this map shows on the right is just a tool we wanted to share with you that we've been working on in the city. This was a map that we prepared for another project we're working on, looking at urban center rezonings along some of our commercial corridors in the city. We used this map and integrated it into what we call a racial equity toolkit, where we try to analyze the impacts of that particular rezoning project that you'll see coming forward in the next couple months as we continue to work with community members on that project. And what this map shows is using information and methodology from the city of Portland, we looked at the possible vulnerability of neighborhoods throughout the city and gave them a ranking. So if you're in red, it's a higher vulnerability to displacement. We looked at measures such as race, educational attainment, and income in those areas when we prepared this map. And again, I just wanted to highlight this as a tool we're currently using for a lot of projects now to try to better understand the relationship between development and what impacts it might have in neighborhoods and on displacement in neighborhoods throughout the city. So to wrap up and get into recommendations by ULI, Urban Land Institute will come back in March. We'll be having a lot of public engagement opportunities in the spring, especially during the months of May and June. And by the summer, city staff hopes to present these recommendations, final kind of recommendations to our city council for consideration, where we can have some action before the moratorium ends in September. Thank you very much, and I'm going to pass it now to Teresa Talman from the Urban Land Institute.
Good evening. Thank you, and thanks for inviting us to your beautiful city of Asheville. We're happy to be here. We're hopeful that the information and recommendations we're providing to you tonight will be useful and helpful as you look further into this hotel growth issue, and tourism issues here in Asheville. My name is Keith McVeigh. I'm the chairman of the panel. We will do introductions of each of the panel members in a second. A little bit about ULI, established in 1936, an independent nonprofit organization dedicated to education and research, with a mission of the Urban Land Institute to provide leadership and responsible use of land and in creating sustainable, thriving communities. About 45,000 members worldwide in a variety of disciplines of land use and real estate disciplines throughout the world. Again, a little bit about the panel. My name again is Keith McVeigh, chairman. I have a degree in landscape architecture from North Carolina State University. Have about 36 years of experience in land use and planning in the planning fields, both in the public and private sector. I'm going to let each of the panel members introduce themselves from there on.
My name is Charlie Johnson with Johnson Consulting. Our firm specializes in tourism and hotel consulting, and we work throughout.
I'm Randy Goddard. I'm the senior principal of Design Resource Group, graduate of the University of Colorado, and have over 30 years of traffic and transportation engineering experience.
My name is Jessica Rossi. I'm a senior planner and economist for Kimley Horn. Kimley Horn is a full-service planning and design firm, and I lead a small group that focuses on real estate market strategies.
My name is Amy Barrett, and I am an urban planner by training. I currently work for the Urban Land Institute. I'm the executive director of ULI in South Carolina. But one of the reasons I'm here on the panel today is because in a former life, I worked as a city staffer for the Charleston Department of Planning when we were going through our hotel moratorium, and have some battle scars from that hopefully you can benefit from.
Thank you, thank you. So background, I think Todd already covered this adequately for us. Community recognition, we did want to point out some things that Asheville is well recognized for. One of the top best places to travel to, prettiest town in North Carolina, 2019, best place to retire to, also out of World Report in 2019, best place for business and careers, top 15, and then named one of the top 50 cities for small businesses, to start small businesses. The panel's assignment, where we did talk a little bit about this as well. What's the appropriate balance of hotel in relation to other uses in downtown or throughout the city? Are there special requirements for hotel development that should be looked at? How can the city work with hoteliers and other folks in the tourism business to reduce the negative impacts and better integrate hotels in the community? And how can Asheville leverage hotel development to meet city goals? Those were the questions that the panel was asked to look at. Our process, as Todd mentioned, we were here earlier in January. The city provided us the briefing book that Todd went through. We had a chance to review that. We came here early in January to listen and understand what the issues were. We toured the city, met with a number of stakeholders to get input from different folks that are involved in the hotel development arena and business. And then we're here tonight to present our recommendations, and then as Todd mentioned, and you'll see here as well, there will be a final report that will be provided to the city in March, and that will be available online. And then I'm going to turn it over from here. I believe I was going to turn this over to, or I can keep going. I think what we heard.
say this one too. This is a great weekend.
I can quickly comment on that. Yeah, if you were here at the ninth meeting, you broke out into smaller discussion group sessions. With the time, the interest of time we had tonight, the number of people here, we did ask for folks to fill out a card, and that way we feel like we can address more of your comments more efficiently with the time that we have.
Tom, it's about using that stand and letting people stand in front of you all and speak, so the whole group can hear what people are saying. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for bearing with us just a minute while we worked on some technical difficulties. We had hoped to be able to present from the dais rather than from the podium, but I understand for recording purposes, and so there'll be a little shuffling, so please bear with us as we each tag team the findings of the panel. So first of all, we just wanted to echo some of the things that we heard when we were here earlier in January, and these sort of thought clouds or bubbles, what are they called? Word clouds, yeah, word clouds are kind of representative of some of the bigger issues that come with hotel development. So we certainly heard a lot about congestion, not only vehicle congestion, but a lot of people being downtown. The need for really thinking harder about what community benefits hotels could be providing. Lots about design, affordable housing, the occupancy tax, all those types of things. And then this one quote at the bottom really resonated with us from the public meeting where, hotels are really a proxy for a lot of other concerns that Asheville is dealing with and going through right now. And community change is hard, but I think you'll see, I think we believe you guys have the skill and the passion to see it through. So again, as we were reflecting on the interviews that we did when we were here earlier and listening to the comments at the community meeting back in January, a couple themes really emerged for us that were helpful in trying to put our recommendations into specific categories. And this first one is, Asheville's hotel problem is really a very specific problem. And the good news is that specific problem is pretty manageable and can be addressed within the time frame that you have allotted yourself. We often won't say this publicly as land use economists and market analysts and good developers, but we really do, upon reflection, think that the moratorium was the right thing to do. Your community needs some time to breathe and reflect, think of where you are right now and where you want to be. So a lot of times moratoriums will throw off market realities and have unintended consequences down the road, but we really do think that taking a break right now is the appropriate action. And the good news is that there are a lot of tools out there. I'm going to share with you some tools that we've been using in Charleston to help manage tourism growth, hotel growth specifically. The other good news is that, clearly this community has leaders who are listening, are passionate, a community that is really engaged, and a sophisticated staff that knows how to use the tools that will help you get to a better place as you try and manage this change. So we're really hopeful and confident that over this 12-month period, you'll come out on the other end in a better place from which you started. And then the other theme that really emerged for us too is that the hotel issue is manageable, and there's some tools in your toolbox that you can use to effectively address hotels specifically. But really, probably there really is an underlying need for an overall tourism management plan, and think about how you not only address these specific issues of hotels, but really how you manage living within a tourism environment. It's probably just dawning on some of you guys that this is a reality, that people love to come here and they're not going to stop coming here. And so management is a lot different than design control and land use regulations. There's a whole nother basket of tools that come with management and consistently thinking about how tourism is impacting your city. It's a dynamic process, and it's never done. Even if you're doing it right, you're never really done with your tourism management. And now I'm going to have Jessica Rossi come up and talk a little bit about this issue of balance and what's right for Asheville.
Thank you. So one of the questions that the panel was asked to look at was, what is the appropriate balance of hotels relative to other uses in both the city of Asheville and then more specifically in the downtown? And I come to tell you today that we really don't have a good answer for that. There's no silver bullet, there's no golden rule, there's no rule of thumb that one community has that others can replicate. It is an innately personal question that each community needs to ask itself. What is that balance of uses? And honestly, a lot of times that balance of uses is driven by your local economy. Who are your major employers? What are your sectors that you're serving? And how does that influence how your community grows and develops over time? What I wanted to talk about really quickly today were kind of two ways that as a community you can look at your balance of land uses, maintain them, and kind of keep track of them over time. And so just to set the stage, it might be helpful for you to understand what your balance of land uses are today. And so this graph at the bottom here represents the share of land uses by type, and what I looked at here was acreage. So what is the acres of land uses by type? And this graph right here is the city of Asheville. So you'll see in the city overall, about 46% of your land use is residential. And so as we talk about hotels today, that's this sliver right here. It's about 1.6% of your total land use acreage. Downtown is a little bit of a different story, but obviously your central business district has a different focus than your city at whole. But even so, hotel is still this odd purple color, and it's hitting at about 5.6% of your downtown inventory. And so while I said there's no silver bullet answer for you, as a market analyst, I feel really comfortable with your land use mix as it sits today. And let's go into some of the findings that help to support that. So when we talk about market demand, so if you truly wanted to let the private market dictate your land use controls, which is not what we're suggesting today, if you wanted to do that, the market here for hotels is performing very, very well. Todd did a great job of kind of setting that conversation up with his really cool blue and red line graphs. I will present you some bar graphs in support of that. So this up here at the top, these light colored bars, they're very light, so those in the back might not be able to see it, but these will be available to the public, represent new hotel rooms that have come online. So even as your inventory of hotel rooms has grown, your occupancy has also increased. So we're not seeing any real saturation of the hotel market. When you look, and this what this graph down at the bottom is, when you look across your city into different areas, downtown has very high occupancy, Biltmore Village has a very, very high occupancy. Tunnel Road and South Biltmore Square, these four submarkets in your city are performing at or far better than the industry standard for where a healthy hotel market is. You know, some of the older properties in the Far East and the West aren't performing quite as well, but are still doing comparatively well. Just to give you one additional point of reference before we move on from market demand, when you compare your community to other peer cities, and this would include those in Tennessee, there's some in South Carolina, Georgia, Virginia. Buncombe County is what this is actually measuring, has the highest occupancy rate, you know, still measuring close to 80%, versus, this is Charleston, they're just under 70%. Savannah, I'm just trying to give you a few that you might recognize. Chattanooga, Williamsburg, Myrtle Beach is just over 40%. So that might give you a little bit of perspective. Another measure that we do like to look at is average daily rates, so how much you pay to get into a hotel room. Same thing, Buncombe County is right around $180 a night. and it goes down from there. And unfortunately, Myrtle Beach is trailing behind in this one as well. So from a pure market perspective, hotels are doing very well here, and there's no real indication of saturation. But that's not to say that we should go gangbusters and build hotels everywhere. The other side of the equation here is really looking at what your community wants to be. And you have guiding documents in place that you can leverage to help you make these decisions. They were community-focused processes that pull in ideas. You have your Living Asheville Plan, which was completed in 2018. And then you have your Asheville Downtown Master Plan, which was completed in 2009. You should use these documents to help decide what that appropriate land use mix should be for you. Updating them regularly to reflect your current community values is critical. They also will help you identify policies that might help to support or attract underrepresented uses. So whatever your economic development goals are, how your community wants to grow and change as it relates to housing affordability, these documents are key for that as well.
Again, my name's Charlie Johnson, and what I'm going to do is start to organize the rest of our presentation, and we've identified 3 categories or buckets that we like to talk about. And we're going to talk about the strategy. We're also going to talk about policy and design and collaboration. And these permeate all kinds of disciplines: finance, design, or planning, etc. So we're going to get into quite an array of those. And I'm going to start by talking about some policy and strategy issues. The worst thing that can happen in a community is when business owners are interfacing with cities, is the absence of transparency. So I think knowing what is desired by the city will allow developers to be better informed to how to respond to the city's desires. And one of the tools that we've used in other markets is what we call a community benefits agreement. And that means the city is going to allow you to develop a hotel in the marketplace. What are you going to do for us? All right, obviously, they would be pleased to build a hotel, and that's what they want to do. But there are other things that can be exacted that really relate to how this is going to be a neighbor that's being introduced into your community. What are they going to do to be a good neighbor? So key performance indicators that could be considered would be, are they going to invest in art and culture in their hotel? Are they going to have a LEED standard applied to their hotel? Are they going to have an embracing relationship with the residents? So in terms of open houses, discount programs to the local residents, things of that nature. Are there opportunities? What's their parking ratio? So we want people to invest in this community, but build assets, not a wasting asset that's going to be invested and dilapidate and the owners don't care. We want them to be part of the fabric of the community. So I think in addition to the application that one puts forward to build a hotel, they have to also communicate what they're going to do for the community for the right to be able to develop that hotel. And I think it's going to take a while. I think that till March, the city wants to start rolling out plans for doing things, and this is part of the exercise to allow that to happen. This is something that needs to be thought through. We also think it's important to consider design guidelines. I think that they need to be revisited. But one of the things that happens in markets like this, I think Pigeon Forge is a perfect example, that so many limited service properties were coming in that weren't servicing the entire spectrum of demand opportunity. So many of the limited service and smaller hotel properties don't have any meeting space. If you have a 100-room hotel, there may be a 500-room in there. We would suggest to make the hurdle tougher, an example could be maybe make a minimum threshold of meeting space, say 20 square feet of meeting space per room. One, that diversifies demand, and number two, it also helps make the hotel a little harder to accomplish, and that makes them, with the community benefits agreement and having a higher standard required for the hotel, and it may be an art program. It doesn't necessarily have to be meeting space. There could be supplemental improvements that you want to have in terms of standards, etc., that could be identified in the modifications to the design guidelines. We think it would be helpful to the city if they would create overlay zones. Here's where we want hotels. Let's put them where they benefit the community the most, and let's do planning and zoning things that help us target those types of things. Maybe a hotel of a certain brand in lower level statute belongs in a certain area, perhaps where a sports complex is. Perhaps downtown is trying to target certain quality and spend levels. So there are a variety of things that can be considered, and this can be quite a good tool to be used. We think that the city could revisit their historic designation for the community, and also we think that Airbnb and VRBO are new phenomena. So all cities are dealing with that phenomenon. I think what has really caused the issue to be magnified is the issue of affordable housing. And that's also happening across the country. So that there are restrictions and modifications and enforcement policies that must be tightened down and used. You already have a consultant that's identifying those, but they're all over the place, and we recognize that. So I think that that's going to be an enforcement issue that just needs to be doubled down upon. Amy?
Thank you. Yeah, and so this is very similar to a process that we went through in Charleston, this idea of design guidelines and how they can be a tool to help you, and also a tool for neighborhood involvement and a way for neighborhoods to express what they like and what they don't like about hotels. So this specific example, that is the Grand Bohemian Hotel in downtown Charleston on Meeting and Wentworth Street. And it's smack dab in the middle of a historic neighborhood called Anson Borough. And when this hotel was originally proposed and approved by our architectural review board, which is fairly stringent, the neighborhood still said, we don't like it, it doesn't fit into the context of our neighborhood, and we're going to be bombarded by loading and unloading and visitors not really in compliance with what we like to see in our neighborhood. And the city recognized that. It was a big hotel, it was a tall hotel, but one of the ways we got around kind of just a subjective kind of reaction of we don't want this hotel in our neighborhood was to really sit down and go through what is it that you don't want to see in this current design, what is it about this mix of uses that are going to negatively impact you, and we sat down with the hotel developer and the neighborhood and kind of worked through how we could improve the design, the site planning, and the traffic impacts for to better protect the neighborhood. And so this is just one example. I like this example. We actually use this in our conversations because it goes through some criteria of what makes a good hotel and a bad hotel. Again, there's no one right answer. This is probably not the same criteria for an Asheville hotel. We heard a lot in our community meetings and our interviews about the newer hotels don't seem to fit into the context, and they seem out of place, they could be anywhere, they're not true or authentic to Asheville. Well, there are tools that we can go about improving upon that process. And so, like I said, these elements, an active rooftop, particularly the way the building meets the street and the mix of uses. Now there's an art gallery on the corner and a coffee shop that neighborhood residents and visitors alike can use. There's probably a different set of criteria that's appropriate here for Asheville, but this is very useful in having a conversation beyond, I don't like it, I don't want it. Let's talk about how we get to a place that we can both agree upon and have this really be a new piece of a beloved corner in your neighborhood. It replaced a derelict building. So it was not an easy process, but at the end of the day, even the hotel developer would agree that we got a better product out of it, and the neighborhood is much happier because of it. Another tool we used is talking about bad hotel development, and that's very subjective as well. But when you talk about something that you don't like, let's be a little bit specific and talk about what is it that makes this a bad hotel, what design characteristics are off-putting or out of character for Asheville, and what negative impacts are you trying to avoid. Again, this is just an example that we used in Charleston. I don't know who developed that hotel, and I'm sorry because we use this all the time as a bad hotel. It's actually probably not that bad, but it is indicative of the use of materials that weren't appropriate to Charleston. The way the parking was handled and exposed to the street was not only unsightly but a little bit dangerous because it creates dark areas. And a streetscape that didn't contribute to the overall public realm. So these conversations, getting into specific details, and the city being open to a process of relooking and re-examining design guidelines can really be helpful to build trust, engage the community, and have a very specific conversation about what together you are trying to achieve. This is another Charleston example, and again, this is just an example of what we've been doing in my city to kind of manage and maintain a hotel footprint in the peninsula of Charleston. Again, the map for Asheville will probably look very different, but what you'll see on the left hand of the screen there is our hotel accommodations overlay zone that was first developed in 1987, so it's been there for a while. The area in the blue is the only place on the peninsula of Charleston where hotels could be built. And it averages every 10 to 12 years, we come back and take a look at that accommodations overlay zone. We tweak the criteria of what is allowable even within that zone. And so there on the right-hand side, you'll see the most recent tweet. Well, it's actually not the most recent. There's a hot off the press version of this too that I was not able to get. But in 2013, we looked further in more detail on the amount of future development parcels that were available within that accommodation zone and pulled it back even more and added some criteria about the new hotel development could not displace office use, could not displace ground floor retail, restaurant. There's a whole list of criteria that I'd be happy to share with you. But again, an overlay is a tool that I'm sure your planning staff is really familiar with how to use and can really be effective in maintaining your hotel footprint. Now I'm going to ask Randy to come up and talk about traffic and transportation.
Thank you. So I want to touch on just a few traffic and transportation policy tools that we think could be implemented. So the first one is, and Todd kind of touched on this earlier, is the trip generation requirement for a traffic study. So we think that trigger could be reduced, and therefore if it's reduced, then there's going to be more traffic studies, and in turn then there's mitigation that's required, mitigation packages that have to be agreed to. That could include intersection improvements, bike improvements, much needed sidewalk improvements downtown. I think this could probably be implemented differently in areas, but definitely within the downtown. If you did this, you would end up with more improvements related to hotel developments. The second item to note is we also don't want to penalize the development if it's a mixed use, or if you're going to bring in local bars, restaurants, it was touched on like an art gallery or local retail. If you could pull that in within the first or second floor, those trips shouldn't count against you, because that should be an incentive to have the right mix of uses. The other item to think about, and I think this plan might be implemented fairly soon, is the idea as another source of funding is to actually require that anyone that's doing development downtown lease the right of way. It shouldn't just be there for free and use as long as you want. Other cities do this, and it's a very good source of additional revenue. And it also prompts developers to get out of the right of way a little sooner and cause less inconvenience for the drivers and the people in the area. And then a couple other items is, with that additional funding, I think to help fund some transit changes, modifications, maybe a circulator that could run downtown between key attractions and maybe even to the city parking decks. And then finally, incorporating some valet parking regulations and standards. I think that would be helpful to kind of look at that and come up with some better ideas. Charlie?
All right. Amy is going to add a couple comments on this as well after I speak on the next slide. What an opportunity to capitalize on. People are already expending energy on this, but if we can use tourism as a tool to bring the community together rather than divide it, that's an attitudinal shift that I think is available to you if there's a mechanism in place to do it. You saw all the work that Amy just presented. That was done at the city level. All right, you have the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and they're doing all the research that they're doing. 10% of the city's economy is related to tourism. So we think strengthening and supplementing the resource capability and focus within the city to recognize tourism as a pillar of the economy and pay supplemental attention and energy at the city level so there can be a stronger response towards these policy issues. That's one of the key ingredients to this. Also, you know, when you look at the split, you've now gotten to a level of collections of $25 million. That's a lot of resources, and part of that is 25% goes to the grant program, 75% is spent on tourism promotion and advancement, and research and things of that nature, and very competently done. At this juncture, I think there's a point in time where that split can be changed at this juncture, because the resources for tourism have gotten to a point. Now that fund can be modified somewhat. Does it have to go all the way to the 33% for grant program? We would prefer that, but it's going to be a negotiation. We also think that using a bid improvement, you have a business improvement district, vitalizing that and using that as a tool to make things better in the areas for security, trash cleanup, and all the things that bids are used for, that would be quite an enhancement as well. We also think it's relevant to consider the prepared food tax. I think there's sensitivity to it because of the equitability of that. So we've seen tactics used where the first $10 of a meal is exempt, and the dollars above that are subject to that. So that's one way to mitigate that. There's a variety of tools to use that. It is a good resource if it's deployed properly. It could be, and the guidelines are a little more flexible on that category of spending than the hotel tax. So there is a little more flexibility and a little different categorization of uses that it's attended to. But you're going to suffer from the same thing. You have a series of investments that need to be made, and you have a series of dollars in the community. Hotel tax is restricted, and that's something, it's oftentimes visualized as a giant pot of money, and it is, but it has to be spent on certain legislative requirements. And I think some of the angst has been the visualization of the dollars and say, but we had trouble over here in the streets, but it can't be used for the streets. So I think what we have to do as an equitability on that is to recognize that we need to lift this so we can spend the money on these categories of things that we're allowed to, That frees up resources where we can spend those resources on the other mandates that we have in our community. And finally, and I'll go back to the theme, every investment that the community makes in terms of neighborhoods, in terms of hotels, thinking about the quality of life, amenitization, that's going to not only be attractive to tourists as well as the residents, is always a way to exploit and take advantage of the opportunity that tourism provides the community.
You guys enjoying this little dance that we're doing? So building on what Charlie was saying and going back to our original sort of overarching themes, is that a lot of what we're talking about tonight is about hotels, and it also isn't. It's about other things. And it's about Asheville coming to terms with being a tourism mecca, and realizing what that means for your residents and how you live a quality of life that is up to your standards. And so one of the things we think should be under consideration is creating a department of livability and tourism. Again, that's an example of something we have in Charleston. I'm not saying Charleston is the star example. We haven't discovered any silver bullets. It's still always a process and a communication between neighbors and city and hotel developers and other people within that tourism constellation. But one of the things that's really been helpful is to have this special department that's led by a champion, someone who understands and is able to articulate the impacts of hotel development, both from a neighborhood standpoint, what that means for planning and development in the city. And so we really think that that's something that should be under consideration here. If not an entire department, but at least something that meets on a regular basis, that provides opportunity for residents to provide input and for, again, more of a management than really problem solving specific issues. Another thing that we would be remiss without commenting on or saying here tonight is that I think everybody in the room knows Asheville's a pretty special place, and people have recognized that, and so they're not going to stop coming. People are going to keep coming. And you walk around the streets of Asheville, and everywhere you see the community's values on your sleeve. You care about equity. You care about kindness. You care about treating people right and patronizing local businesses. I mean, it's a really strong ethic that Asheville sets out there, and you're not shy about it. And that is a good thing. And we think that those kind of characteristics, those elements that are here in the community today, can really be put to use in how you work through these challenges. Change, development, all these things, particularly when they're happening at a really, really fast pace, can be overwhelming. They're always hard, but we really feel like if any community can do it, I think that you guys have the ingredients to really come out on the other side. And part of that is about strengthening partnerships and building trust. We did hear a lot of distrust. There's no one entity that people look to and say, this is who I'm gonna listen to. So hopefully through a process, maybe it is a livability and tourism entity, maybe it is a champion for neighborhoods living within this tourism mecca, somewhere where people really trust the process and the systems that are in place and the individuals who are leading the way. So and that happens through strengthening partnerships, building trust, and having courageous conversations. They're hard to do sometimes. And then also, there's a lot of misinformation out there. Again, that goes back to who do you trust? Right now, it seems like different people trust different sources and nobody trusts anybody. So there's got to be some sort of mechanism where people can kind of come together and all participate in the process and really have a set of facts that you understand from where you're starting and what basis you're starting from. So that said, I mean, we really do mean it that the values that Asheville is known for are really a strength, and it's frankly not very common. And so we really think, again, if anybody can do it, Asheville can see this through and get to a better place than maybe where you started at the first of this 12-month period. So I think with that wraps up our presentation. We're going to leave this panel assignment slide up. I think we are trying to collect some questions from around the audience. But in the interest of time, we might just break here and take some questions if that's all right. And I think we have Stacy here and some city staff folks that are going to collect your index cards, and then we're going to take a seat at the table and hopefully be able to answer this.
You could take just like a minute and just if you want to jot down your questions, please. I've got one to start with, so let's go ahead.
I need a blank.
This looks like it's for Jessica Rossi. 1.6% hotels versus 46% by square acres. How does that relate to the number of units per acre? Does that make sense?
That is an excellent question. Hotels are going to have a much higher density than residential as a whole. So the way that we did that calculation was focusing strictly on acreage, which would include anything from a house on an acre of land to an apartment that is, part of a 100-unit apartment complex, whereas hotels have a much more standard room density across the board. Like I said, I don't think that was the perfect end-all be-all measure of where we start the conversation. It gave us an indication on, this is a 2-day exercise that we have in front of us, and so it gave us a really quick and relatively painless way to at least have a starting point. There's a lot more investigation that I would encourage the city to delve into as this process moves forward, and that's part of our recommendations.
Okay, next question. What do you mean when you say reconsider historic designation of downtown?
Well, I think, again, I'll try to answer that. I think what we heard when we were here earlier in January is that the city at one point in time looked at implementing a historic district in downtown Nashville, but that wasn't done. So one of the suggestions, because one of the things that makes Asheville is the fact that so many of the older buildings have been adaptively reused, they're still here, that makes you unique and special, but do you have protections in place that keep them here for the next generation? Or is the development trend, or is the market going to change, and are you going to start to see more of your older buildings go away, and that changes the character of the city? Historic district is one way to get at it. It won't always preserve everything, but it's a tool that helps you preserve your character that you looked at before. Please, you might want to consider looking at it again.
And I might actually be able to clarify that a little bit. I think what the point that you were making here is local district. Obviously, the downtown is a national district, but if we were to create a local district downtown, that's when we would actually have that mandatory design review authority over design.
Yes, thank you.
Whereas a hotel tax is applied to only visitors, how couldn't a meals tax not be a tax on local residents?
It will be. That's the reason the orientation of the dollar spend is more local oriented in the legislation. So you could use it for things like performing arts centers and convention centers or whatever is in the broad category. I don't have to line item by line item, but it does affect locals. But the locals are investing also. And so that's the trade-off and the argument that needs to get made. And the sensitivity often is because of the equity of the spending capabilities of people, and that's the reason some tools have been used. For example, exempting all food that's bought at grocery stores, putting a threshold on where it starts to be enacted. We have done quite a bit of work on this field, and the incidence of adding a penny when they gets the bill is oftentimes not even noticed, although at the end of the year, geez, I paid quite a bit in food and beverage tax. I understand that. The real intent is, unfortunately, people don't wear hats that say I'm a tourist. So you can't, that's the reason it has to be applied to everyone, and it makes sense, and it is a commonly accepted tool that has been accepted in North Carolina at the state level. So the right to assess it exists, but I think that the nuances of how you all consider it is going to be unique to Asheville.
Okay, next question. The Tourism Development Authority is in the process of creating a tourism management improvement plan. Do you think this work is on the right track?
That's my category. I have been apprised of the research that has been done, and the statistics and the direction that has been prepared is being developed very professionally, and the consultants that are being used are top-notch, and I think that the direction that has been given by the TDA has been in line with it should be. Hopefully the city can improve its collaboration and participation in that, and I don't know if there's a vehicle for that participation. I know at the board level, the city is represented at the TDA, but I think in an active staff position at the city working to participate in that can make it improve the overall, reconcile the tourism side of it, but also implement and integrate the local resident side as well. But it is moving in the right direction.
Thank you. In the land use slide, you had a category vacant and other. Is this where parks and gardens are lost? And if so, why?
No, that's fine. I'm trying to recall where parks, I don't think the answer is going to be there, unfortunately. I'm trying to remember where I ended up classifying parks. They fell, I believe, within vacant, with, of course, the caveat that those aren't future developable land. Others were odd uses that didn't have a really easy place to put them. But the Parks and Rec land that is not built on fell within the vacant. I think that answered the question.
Okay, there's a question about one major correction is that there is no business improvement district in Asheville, and Sasha actually can shed some light on that.
So back in 2012, and many of you might have been here, but we went through a whole process around a business improvement district, and it got a little heated at the end. And we had a public hearing in October of 2012, and City Council actually did adopt the business improvement district ordinance. So there is a business improvement district boundary, and that's why they said it's in place. It is in place. Now, what council did not do is levy additional tax. So I think if council decided to levy additional tax, people would want some input on that. I mean, for them to just do that on a spur of a moment would not be make anybody happy, I think. So, hope that helps.
Here's one. Do we know in Charleston if hotels are approved through a conditional zoning process?
Yeah, within that blue line, if you remember the map that I showed you, that's the only place that hotels can be built, and they go through a pretty stringent technical review process, and then the architectural review board, ARB, and that is at staff level. We have a city architect who makes those approvals. So very rarely will, I'm trying to think if ever in recent years, approval becomes in front of the entire council. It all happens on at staff level, but it is based on whether or not the criteria are met within those zonings. And the criteria, like I said, kind of evolves and adapts. And we recently relooked at both the geographic coverage in that accommodations overlay zone and some of the other criteria there. And again, part of that was displacement of second story units. Like if a hotel was going to come in and build, take over an existing building but convert it to hotels, we had previously required that the ground floor retail not be displaced and be maintained, and now we even are looking at second floor, making sure if there are residential units that those can't be touched as well. So I'm not sure if that answers the question completely.
Yeah. So the next question is actually wanting to know if the panel agrees with this statement. For the mixed-use space, person, I suggest encouraging incubators for independent business and solo. I'm sorry, parameters. And so the question is, do you agree with that statement? For the mixed-use space, I suggest encouraging incubators for independent businesses and solar purveyors.
Right.
Sorry. Like
Alright,
solar entrepreneurs.
That is moving, that could be identified as the benefit that they are doing in the community benefit agreement. That's one tool. I think the demand for incubator space is relatively small, and it's often associated with either community, like when we're working on an incubator kitchen, like the Union Kitchen in Washington, D.C. Those are outstanding amenities. They are tourism. People do like to watch them. So small in the overall frame of reference here. So maybe that can be a category on the community benefits, but I would say that would be one of the lower priority items, and that could be a conversation with the particular developer during the zoning and agreement process.
I would agree with that. Just generally, I think that could be one of an arsenal of potential mixture uses that would be available to mix in with hotels. I wouldn't suggest that we would want to include that in every hotel development, but I think it would be a great fit for some.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next question is, did you look at nonprofit organizations and how much land is occupied by nonprofits, and should nonprofits pay property tax?
That is wading into some very heavy questions. I would have included, in fact, some of the things that fell into others were things like moose lodges and things like that. So that would have been included in that others category, along with churches and things like that. I don't know what nonprofits do and do not pay taxes, property taxes here locally, so I would hesitate to. Churches don't pay. Of course churches don't pay, and I would not suggest that they do, but other nonprofits, a Boys and Girls Club or things like that, it's not in competition. Yeah. So.
Hospitals, universities, those are examples.
Somehow.
And there is a new movement nationally to ask the question, why do these entities not pay taxes, or is their mission so worthy? Is it being executed at the level? So they're trying to find a way, and Chicago, where I live, is going through the same thing. We have so many universities in our downtown. So it's something, so they're trying to figure out a way to implement some form of pilot program or fee-for-services program that we're seeing. But that's at the national level, it's being thought about.
Okay, this is a long one, so. And it has to do with parking and environmental impacts. It is unrealistic to dismiss the impact of those who fly to Asheville. I suspect most, if not all, tourists who do not arrive by car will rent a car to visit Biltmore Estate, drive on the Parkway, etc. Thus, the 1 car per 2 hotel rooms the city has applied is unrealistic compared to large cities with more extensive public transportation. So that's a statement. Please comment on that.
1 parking space per 2 hotel rooms, or 2 parking spaces per 1 hotel?
1 car per 2 rooms.
2 rooms. That is on the lower end of the range. It is not uncommon. It is, oftentimes the hotel parking is sized by the size of the ballroom, because that's where the larger events that happen. So you're not far from the rate ratio. You know, the standard is 1 space per room, but there's wide variance. In a denser community like this, where there is some available shared parking resources or valet that can access that size of ratio is not inconsistent with market standards, although it is at the lower edge.
I would add, one of the things you might want to do is study, because there's probably not a parking maximum, so are hotel developers actually exceeding your minimum, and what are they providing? From a regulatory perspective, you never really want to require more spaces than a use needs. So, you know, maybe it is on the low end, but look at the impact. If you require a lot and then there's a lot of empty spaces, who have really benefited? So there's a balance to be found.
Okay, the next question is, how are the community gardens and green efforts being supported by hotel growth and development? And we're assuming that they mean in other cities and towns that you're familiar with.
This debate exists everywhere. I grew up in Orlando, so you guys on steroids when I grew up. And the way those things are funded is oftentimes, like Chicago has a 2-cent food and beverage tax dedicated for those types of McCormick Place, but also we also have created in other markets separate supplemental property tax items. But the tourism side, in property taxes and hotel tax, you do get a sliver for the grant program today for those types of things. And I think that the food and beverage tax is more oriented towards those rather than the tourism tax. Remember when I said there are certain buckets of expenditure, not necessarily the hotel dollars are used for that, but the hotel dollars are used for something that freed up dollars that can be used for that. And that's what happens, and how this has to be balanced out.
Okay, this one is actually probably.
I hate to say that, but we're looking at right at 7 o'clock, so if we can have maybe one more question and then. Oh,
Here's one last one, and it's kind of a long one. Increasing wages helps increase affordability. Could wages be a part of the CBA? So that's kind of one part of it. Well, why don't you go ahead and answer that?
In fact, one of the criteria on it was agreeing to living wage standards. So that certainly could be that.
Right. And then, because the second part is we need to remember those who live in the greatest poverty too. So, there you go. And then why are we not talking about service workers' wages also? Right. Yeah. In the CBAs.
Those are all to be discussed. I think there's a whole process that needs to be engaged in to develop the CBA. I put it out there. Now we have to populate it. I put the skeleton out there. Now we got to put the meat in the bones.
I would just add to that. I'm not sure if also the question maybe was pertaining to some of the data I showed in my presentation on wages. That service workers would be captured in the accommodations, like your hotel category and some of the other categories in there. But the data it would be hard to extrapolate specifically for certain types of workers, but they are included in some of the charts that I showed on wages.
Okay, do we have time for one more?
last one.
Okay.
A lot of people are having to leave, so I want to honor everybody's time.
Okay. No, we already have. Do we already do that one? I think we're actually going to wind up now, but I just want to let everyone know that. Okay. Today, the Citizen Times reported that 10% of the increase in tourism promotion budget because of because of a 10% increase in hotel rooms. This vicious cycle. More rooms to tell more advertising to rooms.
I mean, we would just reiterate that we do recommend that there be some discussions with the state who would need to approve any adjustments to the split of where those funds go. But we do recommend that that be looked at and that those negotiations move forward.
Okay, so just to wind up so that if some of you feel like you didn't get your questions answered, we are going to continue to take questions through Monday. You can email them to me. You can leave them here tonight also if you still have thoughts that come up, but feel free to email me at smerten@asheville.nc.gov. But if you go to the website that is on your agenda at the bottom, my contact information is there. So, but we do need those questions quickly so that you and I can wind up their process. So if you can get those, any additional questions to me on Monday, then we'll try to answer them for you by the end of next week. Okay? And before we adjourn, I just really want to thank everyone. I especially want to thank, I'm sorry.